Hello, thanks for joining us here on Boulder Bookstore's YouTube channel, and happy Independent Bookstore Day. To celebrate this year, we've reached out to some of our favorite local authors and asked them to answer some questions for us on video. And we are so fortunate here in Boulder that we've got tons of great local authors, so we've actually had to split this up into multiple videos. And of course, we've got copies of all these authors' books in the store, and you'll find, for each video, for the authors featured in that video, you'll find links to their books in the description below. So please watch the video, and hopefully you enjoy it as much as we have. Thanks!
I became a writer, or rather a translator in my case, because I was teaching Norse mythology and related subjects at various different universities, and I found that the translations of the original primary sources were all in very antique English by design. And so that required a lot of translation from that English in order to be usable for students. So I set out to translate the major sources of Norse myth that survived from medieval Iceland into contemporary approachable English, and in some cases my own regional localized Rocky Mountain English, especially in tribute to my grandfather, in a few different translations. Because I talk about Norse myth and related subjects online on my YouTube channel, and that's garnered a certain amount of following, and because that subject itself is such an obsession for so many people, there are definitely some weird things that fans and followers have asked for. Probably the strangest was naked photos of my grandfather. What do I love most about Colorado? Well, look around just about anywhere and you'll see what I love about Colorado. There's just about nowhere in the state that you can't get outside, and meaningfully outside pretty fast, and kind of ground yourself and just enjoy the beauty of the real world. And to me, that's everything. I grew up not too far from Boulder for the most part, and my grandparents were really big readers and took me to all the cool independent bookstores that used to be scattered around the Front Range and mountain towns, and unfortunately there are not so many as there used to be. But Boulder Bookstore has remained substantially the same since then, and it's just amazing to me to have 25 years of memories of that wonderful bookstore, and now in the last 7 years to be treated as a local writer. It's just it's a neat treat, a neat fulfillment of a childhood dream, and a neat sort of reversal of role from being the one kind of wandering the temple to being one with books on the shelf there and signed books on the shelf there. It's a neat turn in my life, and very rewarding to continue my association with Boulder Bookstore into my adulthood and into my own writing career.
Hi, my name is Marcia Douglas. I was inspired to become a writer because I love being intoxicated by language. Reading intoxicates me, and writing heightens that and takes the whole experience of language to another level. I love this feeling of being drunk with words, and writing allows me to dwell in that space. So that's how I came to writing. The most interesting thing a reader of my work has ever asked is, are you a shapeshifter? Do you shed your skin at night? I thought that was really interesting. For me, indie bookstores mean community. When you go to an indie bookstore, there is this feeling that you are in the company of great books, but you're also in the company of other book lovers. Whenever I go to a town for the first time, one of the first things that I want to find out is, where is the indie bookstore? Because a town is only as good as its indie bookstore. Probably the nicest thing that anyone has said to me since the pandemic or at least the best advice that I've been given, is to just relax and be okay with not knowing all the answers right away. And this was a bit of simple but very useful advice, and it's been helpful to me.
I've wanted to be a writer since I was very young. There was a small walk-in closet in my bedroom growing up, and I treated it like an office, and sat on a step stool in there, and wrote a newsletter about the goings-on in my neighborhood and handed it out. I was a pretty shy kid, and it was a way for me to connect with people. That's still why I write. Once, during an online book club, a woman asked if my marriage was okay. I suppose that's because the couples in my writing tend to have conflicts. The answer, happily, is yes. The pandemic highlighted for me how much I treasure the natural beauty in Colorado. The mountains, of course, but the wildlife too. At a time when many activities were restricted, I could walk outside my door and see the Rocky Mountains, and see foxes and coyotes and bobcats, eagles and hawks and great blue herons, and be amazed and inspired by them. I love getting notes from readers. So everyone who's listening, read my book and send me a note. In one email, a reader said my book inspired her to start writing again. I was so glad she connected to my writing in that way. A few readers have said my novel has helped them care for their animals. I can't express how meaningful that is. Independent bookstores help readers discover new writers, and as a new writer myself, I appreciate that. And I appreciate it when I'm looking for new writers to read, too. Independent bookstores choose books with their communities in mind, so I always know I'll find a book that speaks to me at the Boulder Bookstore. When I need a gift, the booksellers there always know what to recommend, even if the gift is for me. There were people in my life who I used to try to buy gifts for who never liked where I got them. Then I asked a bookseller at the Boulder Bookstore to recommend books for them, and that solved the problem.
I was inspired to become a writer when a very close friend of my parents, a visual artist, had a clunky old typewriter that she wasn't using, and she gave it to me as a birthday present on my 7th birthday. So from that point on, you could find me hunched over this typewriter, banging out little poems and dreaming of becoming a writer someday. I've gotten many letters from fans. Nobody's written anything kind of unusual or weird or funny, but I've just gotten a series of letters from people who felt that the books that I published spoke to their story, told their story. So when I wrote my first book, Just Like Us, and it was published, a number of undocumented students wrote to say they'd never seen a book about undocumented students before, and it felt like I was telling their story, and that was really incredibly moving to get those letters. And then the same thing happened when Soldier Girls came out, and enlisted women wrote that the stories that I was sharing were very much their stories of serving in the National Guard and unexpectedly going overseas. I absolutely love living in Colorado because I'm an introvert and I think of myself as a city girl, and I would never have spent significant amount of time in the outdoors other than walking my dog maybe, except for moving to Colorado where inadvertently I've become an outdoors woman. Now I own a kayak and snowshoes and yak tracks, and I spend all kinds of time hiking and up in the mountains, which brings me great joy. Independent bookstores really mean the world to me, and so I was thrilled to get asked to make a video in support of Boulder Bookstore. I live in independent bookstores when there's not a pandemic happening and we can congregate. I really depend on being able to visit with people running the bookstore, chat with other book readers who are browsing the shelves, but most importantly, just see what is new in fiction, what is new in nonfiction, what's new in poetry. And I always come back home with a book that gets me started in a new direction or brings whole new insight to my life. And the kinds of books that I find at independent bookstores I can't find anywhere else. And independent bookstores definitely have sort of made it possible for an author like me to have a career. So I hope that everybody is supporting their independent bookstores at this super critical time where we can help them stay alive and thrive going forward. And I'm so excited that vaccines are rolling out and we can start congregating safely again in our beloved bookstores. Thank you for being a supporter.
Hi, it's Peter Heller here. What inspired me to be a writer? My dad used to read poetry to me every night before I went to sleep. He had me on E.E. Cummings when I was 6 and Yeats when I was 11. Thank goodness I didn't understand the E.E. Cummings then. They're kind of racy. The strangest or funniest thing a fan has ever done, well, I think of two things. One woman grabbed me by a collar and shoved me up against a wall at a book festival in Vermont and said, you know, you're gonna write a sequel to Celine. That's an order. Another time in Bend, Oregon, somebody said, I have something to show you, and took me into a hall, and there were 60 quilts, all unique. Based on scenes from the Dog Stars. I was so moved. They were all hanging. They were so beautiful and so different. I actually cried. Let's see. Independent bookstores could not live without them. There is nothing like having a local bookstore where you know the folks and they're dedicated readers, and I just love going in and asking for people's suggestions and what they've been reading lately and what they've heard about and browsing. It's very, very, very special. And as a writer in Denver, these bookstores on the Front Range, like the Boulder Bookstore, like the Tattered Cover, like the Book Bar, they're like second families. They're like my home. I've launched every book in these stores, and just to have that kind of extended family and support means a lot as a novelist. Colorado, wow, what's not to love? You know, I grew up in New England and New York City, and I learned to kayak on creeks where the high water was early April when there's ice in the water. I came out here to paddle the first time, and it was hot and warm. The high water on the Arkansas, there were snow-capped peaks and elk in the meadows, and I flipped, and I've been in love ever since. I love the diversity of the ecosystems. I love the people. I love the big sky and the feeling that anything's possible. So hats off to the Boulder Bookstore. Hats off to independent bookstores everywhere. We could not live without you. You are the watering holes that we come to for humanity, culture, reading, friends. So thanks a lot.